Hey, what's up, everybody? So we are going to go through this. Oh, no. So this is our scoring guide. So you have access to this. I put the scoring guide. I put a link to some example ones that are scored. So after watching this video, you should know how to score. We went over this already. This is just a refresher reminder. You're going to use this to help you score yourself or score somebody else's to get practice and give feedback to other people. So let's jump right into it with our first one. So scoring criteria, for row one. So there's 6 rows, 1 point per each row. So row one. So what do we have to do? We have to have a video that demonstrates the running of the program. So in that video, there has to be an input, meaning there has to be something that the user clicks, types something in, the user has to engage with it. There's program functionality, meaning you can see the program, the app does something in the video, and there's an output. So if I click and something changes colors, that would be an output. So there should be an input output. And then the written description has to describe the overall purpose, the functionality, and the input and the output. Very easy point. Everyone should get this point. If you don't, it's because you just simply didn't do it. So this is looking at the video and written response 3A. Everyone gets that one. Row 2, data abstraction. I don't know why it keeps doing that. All right, so data abstraction, consider only written response 3B when you're scoring this. So looking at 3B only. So include 2 program code segments, one that shows how the data has been stored in the list. So all they have to show is var num list with all the numbers in or whatever it is. And one that shows that the data in this list is being used. So then there's another program where you're calling that list and then traversing it or doing something. And then in the written part, you have to identify the name of the variable representing the list and describe what the data contained in this list is representing. So is this list of numbers, names, colors, ages? What is it? Okay. Again, really should be an easy one, looking only at 3B. Okay. Manage complexity. I knew that was going to happen. So this is looking at 3B. So you can get a point you can miss row 2 but get row 3. So the written response includes a program code segment that shows a list being used to manage complexity. Explain how the name selected list manages complexity in the program code by explaining why the program code could not be written or how it could be written differently without using the list. For example, we said multiple times, using a list is great because it allows us to not have to name 1,000 different variables. So if your list contains 1,000 numbers, if you didn't have a list, you'd have to write 1,000 variables. So it's very important that they do this carefully. So if you look on the other side, do not award a point if any of the one of the following is true. So the code segment containing lists are not separated, included in the written response. So if they didn't actually show it, the written response does not name the list. So if they don't name the list, they lose this point. The use of the list is irrelevant or not used in the program. So they just put a list in to have a list. The explanation does not apply to the selected list. The explanation of how the list manages complexity is implausible, inaccurate, or inconsistent with the program. Again, its main use is we don't have to use as many lines of code to represent as many things. The solution without the list is implausible. Okay, kind of going back to that. The use of the list does not result in a program that is easier to develop, meaning alternative presents are equally complex. And the use of the list does not result in a program that is easier to maintain, meaning the future change to the size of the list would cause significant modifications. So again, managing complexity, we're focusing on it's going to reduce the number of lines that we have to use to code, because instead of storing one item in each variable, we can store multiple items in one variable, a list. Okay. Number 4, this is where a lot of kids will miss points. Procedural abstraction. So includes 2. So it's looking at 3C. Includes 2 program code segments, one showing a student developed procedure with at least one parameter that has an effect on the functionality. So there has to be a parameter. No parameter, no point. One showing where the student developed procedure is called, has to actually call that procedure. So definition of it, and has to show it. Describe what the identified procedure does and how it contributes to the overall functionality. Okay, so we need a parameter and for this one, and we need it to be showed where it was developed and then where it was called. Okay, so it has to have both. Do not award a point if the code segment consisting of the procedure is not included in the written response, so you have to name it. The procedure is a built-in or existing procedure, such as like an on event or something like that, or the written response describes what the procedure does independently without relating to the overall function. So make sure you describe how your procedure helps your overall program work. Row 5. Include a program code segment of a student-developed algorithm that includes all three of these. Has sequencing, selection, and iteration. Now, every single one of them is going to have sequencing, because sequencing means as long as it's more than one line. So as long as your procedure, or we call it a function, is more than one line, it's going to have sequencing. Selection is an if then or if statement, and iteration is a loop. So it has to have an if else and a loop, or if statement and a loop for this to work. Then explain in detail steps how the identify algorithm works in enough detail that someone else could recreate it. I always recommend, you can always say in line 4 or line 5, whatever line it is, you can use that as reference. Okay, so here's the requirements. Do not give them a point. So I like to go over these. The response only describes what the selected algorithm does without explaining how it does it. So make sure you explain how, not just what it does. Like, this function finds the average age. Okay, how does it do it? Tell me. The description of the algorithm does not match the included program code, meaning you're describing an algorithm that doesn't match what you posted. The code segment consists of selected algorithms as not included in the written response. Again, duh. The algorithm is not explicitly identified, or the use of either selection or iteration is trivial and does not affect the outcome. Also, you won't get the point if you don't have those things. So, anyways. All right, last but not least, this is the bottom one, 3D. Describes two calls to the selected procedure. So two different things you can put into the parameter, is what I'm saying. Each call must pass a different argument that causes a different segment of code in the algorithm to run. So this is where I'm going to be a little bit more explicit. So say you have a function that is called like calc, okay? And in the parameter, you put in like num, and a symbol or something like that. So you do 4, 5, and then plus. And so this might have a program that runs like an if statement. If plus, do this line of code. If subtract, do this line of code. So this one would say it's plus, so we're going to add them so we get 9. Versus if you ran it again, but you wrote instead, calc, this time it's going to be 4, 5 with a minus sign. It runs down here and does 1. This one over here would give you 9. So you have two different calls, two different outcomes, and they ran differently, meaning a different segment of code in the algorithm executed. So if in this program, we would run this line of code, but not the minus line of code. And in the green line of code, we would run this one, but not that one. So they run differently. So it's very important that we do that. Okay. So describe the conditions being tested by each call. In this case, my condition in that example was the if statement, if plus or if minus, and I identify the result, which my example was there was 1 and 9. Okay. Good to read these two, but I think with my example, that's what you're looking for. Two calls to the same procedure or function. So that means you're putting in different, parameters into it. Like mine was 4, 5 plus. That was 3 different parameters. The other one was 4, 5 minus, 3 different parameters. They had different results and they ran code differently. Okay. So you're gonna use this to help self-grade. You might grade. You're gonna grade another students, and I believe I have a Google form for you to fill out. Go over it with the other student, make corrections, and hopefully we're gonna get an A on this. All right, guys, I'll see you.